is News Talk.
It's 7 o'clock. This is Eamon Falvey. Good evening. A judge has indicated his intention to refuse Enoch Burke's application to stop a disciplinary meeting at his school unless he agrees to comply with a court order. The suspended school teacher has been given until tomorrow to consider whether he'll refrain from breaching the order to stay away from the school. News Talk's courts correspondent Frank Graney reports.
A disciplinary meeting is scheduled for Thursday, but Mr Burke is looking for an injunction to stop it from going ahead. In a lengthy judgment delivered today, Mr Justice Conor Dignam has decided he has satisfied the first limb of the test for the injunction. However, he said he's inclined to refuse the relief if Mr Burke continues to breach the order. With that in mind, he has given him until tomorrow to decide whether or not he'll comply with the orders, pending the outcome of the disciplinary process. The case will come before him again in the morning.
A former nightclub owner doesn't believe many venues will want to open until 6 a.m. It's one of the measures being considered by the government to boost the nighttime economy. Experts gathered in Dublin today to discuss ways to revitalise the sector. There are just 85 nightclubs across the country, according to a survey from Give Us the Night. Former club owner Robbie Fox, though, says that doesn't tell the full picture.
So it's not that there's a decline in nightclubs, they've just described differently. People like to go out and drink late, and they do. The law now allows them to go till 2:30. I know there's a proposal to take that to 6 o'clock. I'm not sure whether, there might be room for one or two 6 o'clock clubs, but I don't think there's a room for much more than that.
An iconic Dublin meeting spot has reopened on O'Connell Street. Cleary's Clock returned today after the famous face underwent restoration works. It's part of plans for the Cleary's Quarter, which will see a hotel, offices, retail and restaurants established within the building. John Crowe worked at Cleary's for many years when it was a department store and says plenty of lovers were left heartbroken at the spot.
I give you great memories of that. I used to do the hoovering overtime, naturally at that time. You'd look out and you'd a lad waiting, and then I'd look at my clock. I used to get great fun looking at the clock, and an hour later or an hour and a half later, I'd open the window and I'd say, "You better go, she's not turning up." and it used to be vice versa. There used to be women waiting at fellas and they never turned up.
And that's your news update. It's 2 minutes past 7.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Wind and rain got you down? Cheer up in Lanzarote, Tenerife or the Canaries this winter.
Very cold into tonight with frost and icy stretches developing in many areas. Lows of -3 to +1 Celsius. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Start your day in flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
This is News Talk.
Welcome along to Tuesday's Off the Ball. We've got a really good show planned between now and 10. Not to take away from Richie's thunder on the Newsround, but Ben Healy is part of the Scotland squad for the Six Nations. Tom English is going to be with us to chat about where the Munster man may see game time over the next 6 weeks or so. We'll also be looking back on what was a cracking day at the Australian Open in the searing heat in Melbourne. Andy Murray, with his metal hip, coming through after a 5-set, 5-hour thriller against Berrettini to qualify for the second round. And could headgear potentially reduce or prevent brain injuries? Well, we're talking to Dr. Phil O'Halloran, who is an independent matchday doctor for English rugby and in the Champions Cup, as well as being a neurosurgeon. And he's going to join us to talk about a new 2-year study on Irish players a little bit later on in the programme. Delighted to say that Mick is here with me. How are you getting on, Mick?
Delighted to be that you're delighted.
To be delighted?
Yeah, I'm delighted that you're delighted I'm here.
We've got Richie McCormack with us as well. How are you getting on, Rich?
Equally delighted, William.
Look at this. Everyone's been far too nice. We'll see if we're as nice at 7:30.
Yeah, let's give it a bit of time.
We are going to be talking about this headgear situation in rugby a little bit later on, Mick.
Yeah.
It's something that comes with that caveat that there's always been the discussion around scrum caps, particularly the old style ones, and whether they had any effect on potentially lessening brain injury.
Yeah.
And now these
Which they don't.
Which they clearly don't.
That's accepted now. But I think in the past, the concern with them was that maybe there's a false sense of safety or... I think we're probably past that now, that they're just for abrasions and maybe avoiding cauliflower ears and everything like that. But, obviously it's still worth them wearing them. But yeah, there was definitely a concern in the past that they were like, do people think they're more protected when they're absolutely not?
Well, we're going to be talking to Dr. Philip O'Halloran, not necessarily about the old style scrum cap, but about the new N-Pro headgear, which has been approved by World Rugby on a trial basis. So the RFU have commissioned a study which they're supporting at the moment over the next 2 years. They're going to be taking a look at 200 players from the age of 16 upward, male and female, and they're going to see if some of the claims that have been made, because when Empro, they're actually on the market currently, and they're claiming that it reduces the potential for brain injury by 75%, and now it's going to be independently, clinically assessed to see if those claims actually stack up.
Yeah, very interesting, because it's possibly a game changer if that does prove to be the case. Like, there's a natural skepticism that I think is quite healthy about something like this, so obviously you want this to be as big a study as possible, and it'll be interesting to see what the parameters are and how they will be actually able to judge from monitoring those 200 participants as to how much brain injury will be decreased, or how much instances of brain injury will be decreased.
Yeah, because naturally I think we're all very cynical when that's a claim that comes from a manufacturer.
Yeah, I think it's healthy to be cynical about that, because there has been, you're just worried that whenever you go down the road of suggesting that there is a cure is the wrong word, but that there is I suppose an something out there that's a magic wand to stop what we know is a very dangerous part of the game, and everything about the laws of the game and everything about the refereeing and everything like that is to try and decrease that danger. That when suddenly, if there's a magic wand comes into play, does all of that get cast aside? And can that lead to further you know what I mean? It's all about unintended consequences and so on. So while I'm in no way saying this isn't a good thing, I'm eager to hear this interview, to hear more about it and where we go, and then also to see what the study ends up showing.
Yeah, intriguing to see what happens. Molly McElwee will be with us in around about an hour's time to look back on today's play at the Australian Open. Contrasting day for Novak Djokovic. Dropped just 7 games across his match, easing through. Andy Murray had to come through a bit of a battle. Richie, I know you're a keen fan of Grand Slam tennis. Did you watch a bit of Murray this morning?
Yeah, it's hard not to get wrapped up when the Andy Murray train gets rolling, because between the weather conditions that they had there in Melbourne overnight and everything else, I fully presumed this to be done and dusted by the time I got up this morning. And of course, it's heading to a 5th set just as I'm doing the school run. So, you kind of look at it and go, it's Andy Murray, of course it's going to a 5th set.
Yeah.
But just like he mentions it later on, and I'm sure we'll get to it in the audio, but just how proud he is to be there. Like he was on the brink of retirement. Like, and Matteo Berrettini is widely regarded, an injury and form hit year aside, as one of those next generation stars, one of the ones who could possibly take the place of your Nadals, Federers and Djokovic's. And he beat him in 5 today. And you don't beat somebody in 5, albeit with a final set tiebreak, without having an immense amount of ability still in the locker. And Andy Murray still has that. The worry for him is that he can't put these matches together back to back, because I just don't think, he complained of it certainly at Wimbledon, I don't think his body can hold up to doing back-to-back 5-setters, or even 2 matches in quick succession. The hope is now that he gets some rest and goes off into round 2. He has a bit of a question mark over who he's going to face in the second round, but it's just brilliant to see somebody who's, like, by all accounts, one of the good guys, and it's great to see one of the good guys prevail. To be so close to retirement a couple of years ago, they had that retirement video for him. You'll remember in Melbourne, was it 4 years ago now at this stage, where it was essentially like everyone saying goodbye. Yeah, and there he is there, beating Matteo Berrettini, and now kind of opening up that section of the draw too. It's fantastic.
We were I mentioned Murray in passing on Slight Tangent last week, when we were talking about the greatest of all times, and we were talking about how long Djokovic, Nadal and Federer dominated Wimbledon as 20 years, with Murray thrown in there. And, I even said Big Four, but I got a bit of stick for kind of saying that Murray wasn't on their level, but lived with them for a while. And in fairness, we didn't really go into it, so I didn't explain myself. But like, what I was thinking when I was getting that stick was, like, I really meant that as a compliment to Andy Murray, because he did live with them and he was on their level for maybe not as long as the 3 of those guys dominated, but for those 4, 5, 6 years, he was on and he was competing and he was winning Grand Slams. And it's funny, what he did this morning, I think, is a perfect illustration of what made him such a good player. There's loads of talent there, absolutely. He was a very, very good athlete and a good tennis player, but it's grit and determination and just the overall desire and, like, match play as well, like just a kind of an ability to scrape out a win when it isn't there, like he is such an admirable player. I find it's like he'd be one of your favourites, like, to watch. I was delighted for him this morning.
I don't think, by the way, that's in any way an insult to Andy Murray.
No, it wasn't an insult. It was actually, that's what I mean. It was actually a compliment. It was just perceived as, in all fairness, it was just a gloss over point, so there was no chance to explain myself.
Because you remember 3 guys who were going to retire in the 20 Grand Slam range. Who knows, Djokovic and Nadal could add to that total over the next few years. Now Roger Federer is retired. At the same time, he's probably not going to end up in that territory, but he's still very much talked about as being one of the big four from that 20-year era. And Richie, you mentioned as well 2019, like, it was quite remarkable. They had that video put together. Obviously the organisers thought that day on Rod Laver that was going to be Andy Murray's last time to play. They put it on social media, I think, before the match was even over. It was all played out. Murray leaves in tears, almost like a guy who had to attend his own funeral. And then after that, he's just had to kind of battle away with injuries to be able to even play at these tournaments, whatever will prosper.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's gotten back to this level at all is worth commendation in and of itself, because you're talking about somebody who's had that hip operation. To get to any kind of level of sport following something like that is incredible in and of itself. To be battling at Grand Slams, albeit he can pick and choose his own schedule now at his age, and he can be careful about where and who he plays, but to be operating at that level following the physical exertion that his body has been through over the course of the last decade is remarkable, and he deserves every bit of praise for it. And that determination that Mick mentioned there is that you don't win Anthem without that, and you don't win a couple of Wimbledons and a US Open without having that level of determination. And hanging with those other three for as long as he did is brilliant. Like, and he deserves every bit of credit and praise that'll come his way over the course of the next 3-4 years, whenever it is. He actually does hang up his racket.
Mick, I know you want to discuss as well the Spurs fan who has now been charged as of this evening after the derby at the weekend. Because Shay Given was on AM this morning, was watching OTB AM after the Andy Murray match, and he's making the point that he's been there. He's been at derbies. He's taken quite a bit of flack over the years from Sunderland supporters, Manchester United supporters, Rangers supporters when he was playing for clubs. And he said sometimes you feel as a goalkeeper that you're going to do a bit of an Emi Martinez and maybe try and wind them up a little bit like Ramsdale did the weekend. But he says it's actually a scary thing for a goalkeeper that a fan was able to get that close to injuring Ramsdale at the weekend.
Yeah, I suppose you're a bit on your own there, aren't you? Like, you know, and it's like, I remember, was there a Celtic fan who got onto the pitch against AC Milan and gave Dida a little, and it was only a playful thing, but for this, you could see the fear in Dida's eyes before he realised that there was nothing to it, you know. It's like, that is a scary thing. Yeah, you say I want to discuss, I don't want to discuss, like, in some ways, because what a clown, and he's been charged, and rightly so, but it was just the footage that I don't know when it came out, but I only saw it this morning, of somebody in that end mobile phone where you see this guy coming back, and it was obviously to identify him. But when you actually see where Ramsdale is, and he moves at the exact second that your man, by coincidence, he moves at the exact seconds that your man throws what it can only be described as a punt, you know. And where would he have connected with him? Right in the back of his head. Like, it was, I think when you saw it originally on Sky and the way they showed it, you're like, oh, what a clown. And you see it from there, it's like, that was incredibly dangerous. And it just took on a bit more of a serious note in my head, I suppose, when you see it. Like, I immediately thought, what an idiot. Like, you know, it wasn't as if it wasn't serious initially. But seeing it from that angle, I was just thought, like,
I hadn't realised that
Aaron Ramsdale was very, very lucky not to be incredibly seriously injured. And I can understand why, when the rest of Arsenal wanted to run up to the corner and celebrate, that he was just, you could see that he was kind of almost out of his mind when Arteta was putting the arm around him and said, don't mind it. You could see that he kind of, like, he wasn't able to let it go, and completely understand why. Like, yeah,
understandably frazzled. The Newsround, of course, is brought to you with thanks to Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Rich, where are we starting the Newsround with?
We'll start with Scotland. Ben Healy has been included in their squad for the Six Nations. The Munster at half qualifies for Scotland via his mother's side of his family, and he's due to move to Edinburgh, of course, at the end of this season. Healy is one of 4 uncapped players named by Gregor Townsend for the Six Nations, another being former England winger Rory McConaughey. Hamish Watson and Xander Fagerson are included in their 40-man squad despite injury concerns, but Darcy Graham, Scott Cummings, Rory Darge and Adam Hastings all miss out through injury. Townsend says Healy will bring something different to the Scotland setup.
Well, he brings recent form, which is great. So having experience, playing at high level is important. Having ability, and we feel he's got test match ability. His kicking game is strong. He's confident. He leads the attack well when he gets the opportunity to do that. Munster. He's very connected in how he plays around attack shape and the decisions he makes, where space is, the right options. But really, it's the last 2 weeks prior to the weekend's game. coming off the bench against Ulster, he made a winning difference. The following week he played 80 minutes in terrible conditions against the Lions, played really well. So yeah, it's timely that form has came at a time where he's also committed to us, and with the opportunity with Adam Hastings being injured, he now gets a chance to train with us, for us to see him integrate with our group and see how close he is to being in that squad for Twickenham.
Mick, that would imply to me that Gregor Townsend's been watching him for quite a while.
Yeah, well, that's what was implied, I suppose, when the move was made. You know what I mean? I don't think Edinburgh would be signing him unless this was a bit of a long-term plan. It's interesting that he's put him straight in. I suppose they have to assess what they have before the World Cup. Kind of happy for him. I think it's going to lead it's like we're talking about Eddie Jones last night. It's going to add a lot of interest to Australia. I think having Ben Healy involved is going to add a lot of interest to Scotland. It's going to be strange, isn't it? Like, this is a guy I remember watching. You know, I was there when Ireland won the
20s.
The 20s Grand Slam, you know, at the England match anyway in Cork. I don't think that was actually the Grand Slam game, but Healy and Harry Byrne were battling out, and it was like, this is the future of Irish out halves, and he's going to be playing for Scotland like in 2 weeks. You know, possibly. It's still just such a strange thing, but look, it's probably the best for all parties.
Yeah, well, look, with Adam Hastings' injury, there's a very good chance he's on the bench for the first couple of games.
Yeah.
We'll see how Hastings' recovery goes, but he's got the potential here to impress. And the other thing is, Richie, if the World Cup is the longer term aim and Ben Healy wants to be in that final squad for the World Cup, this window now provides an opportunity. It's a perfect shop window for him to potentially impress before Hastings is back.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge, and it kind of puts a case forward for searching far and wide for players. I mean, you look at the Rory McConaughey thing as well. He's 4 years in the wilderness with England, and just 3 caps to his name. They bring him in as well because he qualifies through familial situations. You can't blame Scotland for being a bit more canny about how they've gone about recruitment and trying to build their depth ahead of the World Cup, because like we talk about that World Cup pool in terms of whether we finish first or second, and whether or not finishing second is probably going to be better than finishing first based on who we're going to possibly come up against in the quarterfinals. For Scotland, like, they want to actually compete and battle us for that second position getting out of the group. And in their heads, you know, based on form of maybe a year or so ago, they would be in contention to do that. But you always kind of felt as soon as injury started to bite, 3rd, 4th week into a Six Nations, they would drift away. This is something they're, I guess, trying to counteract against that with the injuries they already do have, to try and, like you say, the World Cup has got to be their aim. There's a couple of coaches saying, no, this isn't a free shot with the Six Nations, and we're kind of focusing on that first and foremost. Scotland, you would imagine, are focusing on the World Cup and trying to take down Ireland and the Springboks in that pool.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually, Richie, because there's another thing about that. Sorry, we're right about them searching far and wide, but there's another thing about that. It's like Ben Healy was qualified for Scotland the day he was born, you know, and I think there was an article in the London Times there a few days ago, basically this is kind of like blaming Scotland almost for having 2 more naturalised players than anybody else in the Six Nations. I think they said shamelessly Scotland have a certain number or whatever. You know what I mean? I think that tone is just slightly off. You know, this was the same article, by the way, that listed Luke McGrath and Ultan Dillane as non-Irish because they were born outside the country, despite growing up here. You know, like, so, you know, you have to be wary about what you read sometimes as well. But yeah, this is like, I just don't think that tone works. If this is Ben Healy's decision, in the same way as it is in any other international sport, if you have an issue with the residency rule, that is a different thing. This isn't that. You know what I mean? Ben Healy is fully entitled to play for Scotland.
Yeah, I read the article at the weekend. You would have been talking about the Catalan Geordie Murphy, the Israeli Jamie Heaslip, the Canadian Luke McGrath. So it was very much a stretch in the way that they were defining players. Liverpool looking to bounce back. We talk about injuries, Richie. Around a dozen players missing for Liverpool at the moment, and on the back of a very poor defeat against Brighton at the weekend.
Yeah, Liverpool away to Wolves tonight. It's one of 5 FA Cup 3rd round replays that survived the weather. Rather different looking Liverpool than the one that lined out at the weekend. Caoimhín Kelleher starts in goal. The likes of Kostas Tsimikas, Stefan Bajcetic, Naby Keita, Harvey Elliott, Fabio Carvalho are all starting tonight. Mo Salah, Fabinho, Alisson and Andy Robertson among those on the bench. Joel Matip too. Diego Costa is back fit for Wolves. He's good enough for a place on the bench for them. Joe Hodge continues in their midfield. Kickoff there is at 7:45. Freezing temperatures, though, forced the postponement of Accrington Stanley's meeting with Boreham Wood. Elsewhere, ex-Sligo boss Paul Cook leads National League side Chesterfield to the Hawthorns to play West Brom. Dara O'Shea and Jason Malumbi on the Baggies bench. Forest Green take on Birmingham City tonight. Bristol City face Swansea City. No Michael Obafemi again for them. And Wigan are at home to Luton. Both James McLean and Will Keane are on the bench for Wigan there.
Third round FA Cup was important for Irish players. Maybe replay night might be important too.
Yeah. I never thought we'd get an Accrington Stanley versus Boreham Wood update on Off the Ball, but Richie goes deep on the Newsround. Yeah. Justin Liverpool are playing that team. Yeah. Like that's their third round League Cup team. You know, it's like, which is, you know, it could get the job done easily, but they didn't do that for the first game when Wolves did. You know, and I know it's probably just it's a game too many, but you know, I feel like the FA Cup should have almost got more important for them since that game, given what's happened in the league. But,
yeah, potentially if they go out, especially you're thinking they've used their first team players at Anfield in the previous round and now had to rest and potentially get knocked out by Wolves.
Yeah, absolutely.
They go through.
Yeah.
The narrative isn't completely different.
Oh, it's completely different, and then the players are rested for the weekend and so on. Yeah, so maybe they just need a freshen up as well. Like, I mean, there's an argument to say this isn't the second team.
Yeah, Mark Lawrenson, by the way, you can probably pick this up if you want in the football feed on our podcast. He was talking this morning and said that really Jurgen Klopp had to stick with a fairly strong team he felt for the game this evening because there was a risk of throwing the young players in, the poor results continue, and then you ruin things for the young players who are trying to get into the side. Manchester United, Liverpool both trying to sell at the moment their owners, Richie, and potentially Manchester United have a buyer now.
Yeah, well, certainly they've got the most press-savvy one in contention. Ineos have formally entered the running to buy Manchester United. The petrochemicals company is owned by one of the UK's richest men in Jim Ratcliffe. Ineos already own French club Nice and Lausanne Sport in Switzerland. And, of course, the cycling team, Ineos Grenadiers. United's current owners, the Glazer family, are hoping to raise nearly €6 million from the sale of the club.
This is Jim Ratcliffe, who not that long ago, Mick, was looking at Chelsea before Todd Bowley stepped in. He obviously has got, as Richie mentioned, a lot of assets in sport already. He claims he's a Manchester United fan as well.
Claims, yeah. You don't believe him?
Well, he says he is.
No, I think he probably is, yeah. I don't know. It's hard to know about these things. It's just like literally reading some old articles on how he got his money and what he campaigns for, and it's all not great, but I mean, it's not going to be for almost anyone who buys a club of this size. That's just sort of
I would
the way
suggest
it is.
If a Manchester United fan sees Old Trafford getting a refurb, they won't care about fracking.
Well, I was going to say, and fine, yeah, they won't care about fracking and campaigning to have more fracking. But look, I mean, absolutely, I think that there is going to be. I think United fans will be delighted with this outcome if it happens, and that seems to have been the case for months now. That Jim Ratcliffe seems to be the name that everybody wants, and that's when fans talk about it, it seems to be Ratcliffe's name that comes up as the saviour. So we'll see. I mean, there's issues with everybody, but I mean, until it happens, until we dig more into it, we won't know. But I think United fans certainly will be happy with this news today.
Rich, when it comes to these reports too, they're talking about potentially the Glazers looking for a buyer within the next 2 months or so. This seems to be heavily dictated upon by Liverpool trying to sell at the same time as well.
Yeah, there was apparently a story that went side by side with this. Goldman Sachs are looking after the sale of Liverpool, or indeed the searching for fresh investment, as the owners put it recently. Apparently, they put the idea of investing in Liverpool to Ratcliffe, who decided, no, I only have eyes for Manchester United. But as I alluded to there, like, United fans need to be careful what they wish for, and it isn't even the ancillary stuff to Ratcliffe's business practices or whatever. It's more so that he is the most media savvy of the people who will probably be in the running to buy the club, and they need to be careful that they don't mistake being media present and being up for an interview as being somebody who is able and willing to take on a Premier League club of that size and stature and deliver them back to where they probably think they need to be. They're two very different things, and it's probably in a more giant scale. It's similar to what Michael Knighton tried to do in '89 when he was all over the press and was very keen to give interviews, and turned out he didn't have the wherewithal to take over the club. Ratcliffe clearly does from a financial aspect, but whether he has the knowledge and the know-how to deliver things to Manchester United. You look at Nice, like, big things were promised for Nice. They got to the Champions League, but they haven't necessarily made that massive kick on that a lot of people would have presumed they would have done in France. So I'd say United just need to be careful about who they're looking at and don't mistake media interviews as ability.
So one thing you said that jarred Richie was that the Glazers are looking for 6 million. I think it might be billion.
6
Yeah.
million.
I got actually a fright there. I was like, hold on, can we get a consortium together to buy Manchester
6 million.
United?
Might be able to find it down the back of the couch, potentially. Text coming in from Phil on 53106 about Andy
I have
Murray.
a cold.
Yeah, Andy Murray played in 11 Grand Slam finals between 2008 and 2016. He's one of the select few to play in all 4 Grand Slam finals, but for injury, probably would have competed in and won more than that too. So he's a bit more than a support act for the other 3. Bundee Aki has been missing a bit for Connacht recently, Richie, and there's plenty of speculation about his future because his contract runs out at the sports ground at the end of this year. But it looks like the RFU and Connacht are going to extend that stay.
Well, or so we thought. Connacht head coach Pete Wilkins insists Bundee Aki still has a future with the province. The Ireland centre has been left out of recent Connacht sides based on form, but Aki's contract is due to run through to the end of next season, despite concerns he could leave at the end of the current campaign. Meanwhile, Quaylen Blade has signed a new 3-year extension with Connacht. The scrum half is going to remain at the sports ground until the summer of 2026. Blade's new contract follows a 2-year deal signed yesterday by John Porch.
What do you reckon, Mick? Bundee Aki, 32.
Yeah.
World Cup at the end of this current year. So he signed up until beyond the World Cup till the end of next season with Connacht. But obviously that contract is now running down. He'll be 33 if he's to put pen to paper on a new deal. Do Connacht and the RFU offer him a new deal?
I don't know. You would doubt that it would be centrally contracted anyway.
Plenty of good centres at the moment. The Irish system, that is.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, I have to say, that he'd be on his way out. You feel like there's tenure there almost, you know what I mean? But it could work out. I would think they would offer a new deal, but will it be up to what he can earn by going for a year to to England or to France or whatever it is, who knows. There was a sense when Bundee Aki signed his last contract that this was kind of him committing his international future anyway. Like, obviously his international future, but his international window, that he would stay with Ireland. And I think beyond that, nobody really thought past the World Cup or past that following season.
So many of the deals, 2023 became key, that they were contracted till the end of the World Cup.
It almost, you know what I mean? In some ways, I feel like this can be he's definitely not going to be as key back then, which by the time his contract runs out, which means that this becomes less of a pressing matter for everybody involved, I would say.
Richie,
although that might not be the case given he's not playing too much at the moment, so who knows what's going on there.
We spoke with Andy Murray a bit already, Rich. What happened elsewhere in Melbourne today?
Novak Djokovic marked his return to the Australian Open with a straight sets victory over Roberto Carballes Baena today. The 9-time champion, though, says he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Djokovic must wait to discover his second round opponent with extreme heat and heavy rain delaying play on the outside courts for 3 hours today, and plenty of matches will need to resume overnight. Andy Murray, as we mentioned, beat 13th seed Matteo Berrettini in a 5th set tiebreak. 2nd seed Casper Ruud, 5th seed Andrei Rublev, 8th seed Taylor Fritz and the 12th seed Alexander Zverev all moved into round 2 today. Women's 2nd seed Ons Jabeur wasn't given an easy ride, having to come from a set down to beat Tamara Zidanšek. There were also straight sets wins for the 4th seed Caroline Garcia, 5th seed Arina Sabalenka and Elise Mertens, who beat Garbiñe Muguruza in 3 sets. Meanwhile, Camilla Giorgi has denied allegations she obtained a false COVID-19 vaccine certificate to allow her to travel to Australia. The Australian's name was listed among the clients of Daniela Grione, a doctor who was charged in Italy with providing false documentation and also false vaccines. Georgie breezed into round 2 today, dropping just 1 game in her match with Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova.
There was us thinking that COVID-19 Australian Open, we'd forgot talking about them together. Swindon Town as well, Richie. This is potentially another member of Stephen Kenny's backroom team leaving, possibly?
Yeah, Swindon have made a formal approach to the FAI to speak with Stephen Rice. The Republic of Ireland's chief scout and opposition analyst is in the frame to replace Scott Lindsay at the English League 2 side. Rice's departure would mark another significant blow even to the Ireland boss Stephen Kenny, who will start their Euro 2024 qualifying campaign in just 2 months' time.
Far from ideal, Mick, because every time that Stephen Kenny has been asked about Anthony Barry not being replaced, he pointed to the fact that Stephen Rice has been so crucial within this backroom team and that his work went beyond just the sheer scouting of the other teams, that he'd become a very important coach in the setup and almost like having another assistant coach involved as part of the setup too. Like, to lose him what would be pretty much right before an important European Championship qualifying campaign, it's horrific timing as well.
Yeah, Stephen Kenny maybe needs to start hiding these people. So it's like, put a figurehead out there. Will O'Callaghan as the assistant manager and coach of the team or whatever, and then hope Swindon come in and swipe you away.
I'm
and
open to offers Portugal. I will work with Roberto Martinez for the next 4-year cycle if you need.
Yeah, God, it isn't ideal though if that is the case, and it's like Ireland lose another coach, and that every time the players come into camp there's somebody new kind of like giving the ideas, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, not great if it does happen, but at the same time, do you hold people like that back? Do you wish Stephen Rice doesn't go and fulfills that part of his career so he can stay as a scout for FAI? Of course not. Like, I mean, it's the right move for him if he gets the job. Fair play to him. And this is what, you know, this is like what regimes, for want of a better word, have to put up with, and it's just, that's part of being a manager, you know. Like, if you look at the NFL and the way they do things, it's like right now while the playoffs are on, like there's offensive and defensive coordinators off interviewing for head coaching jobs. It's just a done thing. There's no sense of you're going to stay here and wait for the big job to become available.
People leave for different reasons. It'd be more worrying if they were leaving because they weren't happy about the setup.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And with Anthony Barry, they both left for jobs.
They both got for better jobs. Yeah, so this is just the way it works. Like, so it'd be a good opportunity for him for sure.
Mick, thanks a million for joining us. Richie as well.
Delighted, Will.
Thanks, Rich.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Now, for 2 days in a row, someone has missed our call and missed their chance to win big. It means we have a double rollover tonight. If you entered since 5